Hello everyone. Today I will be discussing an article on teen drinking. I will be covering the no side, which is titled Providing Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Services to Adolescents. The no side of the article was written by Sandra A. Brown on June 15, 2004. My name is Catherine Navarrete and I will be covering the no side. Now I will be speaking about teen drinking and reasons for early prevention. I will cover 6 topics about early prevention and why these are needed. So here we go. Teen drinking and reasons for early prevention. Our first one is early onset. Second is neurodevelopmental studies. Third, vulnerability. Fourth, binge drinking. Fifth, prevention of abuse and dependence. And sixth, improving effectiveness of treatment. I will now be starting off with early onset. The NIAAA, which is the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, and NIDAS, the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Their supported researchers are finding that alcohol and other drug addictions are commonly starting earlier than previously. The age of most prevalent tobacco dependence onset is 15, and for alcohol dependence it is 18. This is also the age that is most common of the first diagnosis of dependence. Alcohol is the primary substance of abuse among American children and adolescents. 47% of 8th graders, 67% of 10th graders, and 78% of 12th graders have used alcohol. 11% of 6th graders have reported binge drinking. This is 5 or more drinks per occasion with males and 4 for females in the past 2 weeks. 30% of high school seniors have reported binge drinking at least once a month. 44% of college students have reported binge drinking in the past 2 weeks, and 23% have reported that they binge drink frequently. Youth who drink alcohol before age of 14 are 4 times more likely to become alcohol dependent in their lifetime than those who wait until age of 21 or older. Moving on to neurodevelopmental studies. Emerging findings from neuroimaging studies demonstrate that brain structures change during adolescence to become more specialized and efficient in their functioning. Our developmentally focused research indicates important neurocognitive disadvantages among adolescents with alcohol and drug use disorders as compared to teens without substance involvement. For example, even after 3 weeks of abstinence, alcohol-dependent youth display a 10% decrement in delayed memory functions. Neuropsychological testing of these youth followed up to 8 years demonstrates that continued heavy drinking during adolescence is associated with diminished memory of verbal and nonverbal material, and poorer performance on tests requiring attention skills. Alcohol and drug withdrawal over the teen years appears to uniquely contribute to deterioration in functioning in visual-spatial tasks. Recent brain imaging studies of alcohol and drug-using youth compared to youth without such experience have also shown reduced hippocampal volumes, white matter microstructure irregularities, and brain response abnormalities, while performing cognitive tasks among those with early alcohol/drug exposure. Continuing with neurodevelopmental studies. Additionally, youth who have extensive experience with alcohol have increased brain response when viewing alcohol advertisements compared to other beverage advertisements. Animal studies are consistent with the findings that alcohol or drug exposure during adolescence has more adverse consequences than delayed exposure during adulthood. In these investigations, adolescent alcohol exposure is associated with more frontal lobe damage and poorer spatial memory. Further research is needed to understand how age of drinking or drug use onset and duration of abstinence at the time of assessment affect cognitive and behavioral findings. Vulnerability. Early initiation of substance involvement is a strong predictor of dependence, but not everyone who uses at a young age later becomes dependent or develops an abuse problem. Being exposed to substances at an early age won't necessarily make you dependent. Even youth who have 2 alcoholic parents don't become alcohol dependent. Only about 1/2 become alcohol dependent. The outcome of becoming dependent is largely determined by the interplay of environmental and genetic/biological factors. Environmental factors have the biggest influence on whether a child first uses alcohol, tobacco, or other substances. Genetic factors have an influence on whether a child continues to use. Binge drinking. Episodes of heavy drinking is a problem for people of any age group, whether or not the person is addicted to alcohol. Binge drinking is 5 or more drinks for males and 4 or more drinks for females. Binge drinking is a problem in general, but it has become especially an issue amongst adolescents, and the numbers are increasing. Drinking too much and too fast can be very dangerous because with binge drinking, many risks can come and they can occur, especially with the youth. Some of these risks are car crashes, injury, death, property damage, encounters with the justice system, and problems with family, school, and workplace. Each drink increases the fatal crash risk more for youth than for adults. At a blood alcohol level of 0.08% in every age and gender group, there is at least an 11-fold increase in a single vehicle fatal crash risk. Among males 16 to 20, at a blood alcohol level of 0.08%, there is a 52-fold increase in single vehicle crash risk compared to sober drivers in the same age. I will now be speaking on prevention of abuse and dependence. Prevention of alcohol and substance use problems among youth need to be understood as a continuum of services, and consequently research needs to span this continuum. This continuum ranges from universal prevention, for those appropriate for all children and adolescents who might use alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs, to selective preventative measures for subgroups with risk factors for abuse or dependence, to indicated preventative measures for those individually at high risk for the disorder. It is important to evaluate prevention programs on an ongoing basis, as well as disseminate research findings to communities, educators, parents, and healthcare providers who are the first line of defense against alcohol, drugs, and other risky behaviors. Clearly, alcohol and substance use disorders are the result of a complex combination of genetic and environmental interactions that influence how people respond to the substance and their initial propensity for using alcohol and drugs. Longitudinal studies of these genetic and environmental factors are crucial for understanding the following: early initiation of drinking and drug use, transition to harmful use, abuse, and dependence, and lastly, remission and abatement of alcohol and drug-related problems in untreated populations. And lastly, I will be talking about improving effectiveness of treatment. Findings from the National Household Survey on Drug Abuse indicate that about 10% of 12 to 17-year-olds, so about 2.3 million, are heavy users of alcohol or drugs, yet only 187,000, so 8%, received services. Although estimates of cost effectiveness of early intervention are speculative, research suggests that early treatment has the potential to be cost effective, especially in comparison with incarceration or treatment for a long-term abuse problem. Developing, evaluating, and improving efficacy and cost-effectiveness of treatments is a central goal in alcohol, tobacco, and drug research. Adolescent-focused treatment research lags behind adult treatment research. Studies are needed to develop and test new behavioral therapies, conduct clinical trials in existing treatment settings, examine cost-effectiveness of behavioral and pharmaceutical therapies, clarify mechanisms of actions that make effective treatment successful, and conduct trials of dissemination strategies to test how effective they are at introducing behavioral and pharmacological treatments into real-world clinical practice. Clearly, multifaceted longitudinal research is sorely needed to fully understand the development and resolution of alcohol and drug use disorders in the context of child and adolescent development. Teen drinking conclusion. Now I will be talking about just some things that I found interesting or persuasive that kind of had me on the no side. So something I found particularly interesting and alarming was the number of young children that are in middle school that are already drinking. I kind of understand high school just because we hear about drinking in general. We see it on movies, we see it on TV shows. It's pretty much normalized. Another thing that I found interesting was to know that even if adolescents have two parents, that drink or are alcoholics, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will be also. And from here is where I paid attention to the genetic and environmental factors that come into play for alcohol dependence. So now it's up to you to see and figure out if you think teen drinking should be allowed or if it shouldn't be allowed. And I just wanted to say thank you so much. And my name is Catherine Everett, and thank you for listening to my presentation.